Connector Study, Steering Committee, and Working Group. Since this is a public meeting that involves 3 or more elected officials of our policy group, I will read into the record our electronic meeting statement. Given Governor Northam's declaration of a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, today's joint RCS Steering Committee and Working Group meeting is being held by electronic communication means through the WebEx platform. This meeting is being recorded and is required to complete essential business on behalf of our region. Per the requirements of the Code of Virginia, public notice was given contemporaneously with the notice provided to the committee and working group members. The agenda and supporting documentation were made available on the HRTPO website. Members of the public were invited to submit comments in advance of the meeting via email or telephone. And public access to witness the meeting today is being provided via live stream. And I see a text message in the chat room. Thank you, Logan Grimm, our IT manager, who is confirming that our live stream is on and is running on our Regional Connection YouTube channel. As a reminder, in an electronic public meeting, all votes taken today will be recorded by name in roll call fashion. And Dr. Robinbach, as your project manager, will be calling those roll call votes for you today. As a quick reminder, please keep phones and computers on mute until you're called upon by the chair to provide input. And please remember to go back on mute after speaking. When speaking and when providing a motion or a second, please identify yourself by name and the locality or agency you represent. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn that back over to you and recommend that we go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask Dr. Robinbach if she could please conduct today's roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. We're going to now officially call this meeting to order and ask Dr. Robinbach to bring us up to date with the purpose of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to do the attendance roll call, starting with the City of Chesapeake, Mayor West.
Present.
Thank you. City of Hampton, Mayor Tuck. Thank you. Newport News, Mayor
Present.
Price. Present. Norfolk, Mr. Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Portsmouth, Mayor Glover. Mayor Glover, City of Portsmouth. City of Suffolk. Did I hear something? Okay, let's continue. City of Suffolk, Mayor Duman. City of Virginia Beach, Mayor Dyer.
Present.
Thank you, Mayor. Moving to the working group members, City of Chesapeake, Troy Eisenberger.
Present.
City of Hampton, Miss Lynn Cannon.
Present.
Newport News, Mr. Brian Steele. City of Norfolk, Mr. Brian Fowler.
Present.
City of Portsmouth, Mr. Carl Jackson.
Present.
City of Suffolk, Mr. Jason Souders.
Present.
And City of Virginia Beach, Mr. Rick Lohman.
Present.
Thank you.
This is Mayor Dimon from Suffolk. I am present.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, going through the agencies, Virginia Port Authority, Kathy Vick.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kathy. Keith Chope. From the Navy, Michael King.
Here, Camelia. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michael. Steve Jones.
In a meeting, that's all.
From the Army Corps, Colonel Patrick Kinsman.
Camelia, I'm not sure if the colonel's going to be here, but this is George Janik. I was able to make this meeting after all.
Okay, thank you, George. Keith Lockwood. Robert Bruce. From the Coast Guard,
Yeah,
Jim
no, it's
Leonard.
It was 3-something.
All right, that's all.
From,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
But I'm gonna hold off on mine because I gotta tear a bunch of shit up to get to it.
Ivan Rucker from the Federal Highway Administration. From VDOT, Chris Hall. Pam Phillips.
I'm here. How you doing?
Hi, Pam. Hi, Pam. Eric Stringfield. And Jennifer Selliers. From Haronga, Craig Quigley.
I'm here, Camelia.
Hi, Craig. Thank you. Rick Dwyer.
Yes, good afternoon, Camelia.
Good afternoon. From HR TAC, Kevin Page.
Kevin Page here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kevin. From the consultant team, Craig Eddy.
I'm here.
Lorna Parkins. Claudette Lajoie.
I am present.
Hi, Claudette. Anthony Donald.
Present.
Zach Harris. Bill Thomas.
Present.
And from the staff, we have Bob Crum,
Present.
Pavitra Parthasarati, Rob Case, Dale Stith, and Kit Nichols. Did I
Dr.
miss anybody?
Dr.
Did I miss-
Rodenbach,
Yes.
Dr. Rodenbach, I see that Mayor Glover has joined us.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Good
Mayor Glover-
afternoon, Mayor.
Mayor Glover is present.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think we got the attendance, the roll call done. Back to you.
Mr. Chairman, we're having trouble with your audio.
Yeah, it helps if you unmute. I was asking Dr. Robinbach or Mr. Crum if you would just give us a review of why we're here and the purpose of the meeting so we can take care of that task.
Yes.
Okay, I can do that, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, we had a meeting last week on June 22nd, and you were briefed by the consultant team on the 8 alternatives. And basically today we're here to take actions on the preliminary alternatives. So what the consultant team briefed you last week, the work that the working group has been doing in the past couple of years, in the past several months, going through the technical analysis of all those 8 alternatives. And what we have, we've done a lot of travel demand modeling. We looked at a lot of performance measures from those alternatives. And the working group and the with the work of the consultant team, they have eliminated 2 of the two alternatives, 5 and 7. And I think, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, last week we tried to take some actions, but we didn't have enough members of the policy committee to take any actions, and that's why we the chairman requested that we schedule a brief meeting. It's supposed to last for 30 minutes and to take actions on the recommendation that we have from the working group. I think with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll pass it to you, but I think you also have item number 3, public comment period before we move to to item number 5.
Okay, thank you. Was there any public comment?
No, we have not received any public comments.
Okay, good. So what I'm going to
I'm
do,
sorry, Mr. Chairman, we also have the minutes that we need to take action. Minutes
Okay.
from last week.
okay, could I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
Mayor Tuck, move.
Second?
Moved in second. Any objection to the minutes? If not, they will stand approved.
I do a quick roll call. Mayor West,
Yes.
Mayor Tuck,
Aye.
Mayor Price,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas,
Aye.
Mayor Glover,
Aye.
Mayor Duman, Mayor Duman from Suffolk, and Mayor Dyer.
I think I have to abstain. I was not present.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have majority, so I think the motion passed.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to do is I guess go back to where we were. Ask for a motion. I believe we're going to have a substitute motion also presented. So if you would, could I have a motion to proceed as the committee recommended with the options that were presented at the last meeting?
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a substitute motion when you'll allow it.
Okay. Go
I think
ahead
I
with
made
the
the motion last time, so I will go ahead and make it again.
say again.
I thought I made a motion the last time, so I'm going to move approval of the motion. I think it was on the
Okay.
floor. You see it?
Okay, it's been a move to accept the recommendations of the working committee. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Mayor Glover?
Moved in second. I think now would be appropriate, sir, for your substitute motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to renew this substitute motion. So the substitute motion, for those who were not available next week, is to include alternatives 5 and alternative 7 in the continued study. And basically here are the reasons why, so that you understand. This study, this $7 million in this study exists because we decided as a region to use our regional money to fund expanded Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. And for years, this region has been studying and trying to figure out a way to get a third crossing across Hampton Roads. Norfolk has had to shoulder an unwarranted burden of truck traffic on Hampton Boulevard, an amount of truck traffic that will continue to grow and that any locality on this call would be extremely unhappy with and would not put up with if you had to shoulder that burden. Craney Island is going to be a port which will have a truck calculation or truck count that will exceed all of the other ports in the region combined, is my understanding. I'll let the port clarify that if they need to. That will be an inordinate amount of truck traffic that Portsmouth will have to shoulder all on its own, on its city streets. If we do not ensure that this third crossing connects with 564 and connects with Craney Island. Alternative 5 gives us an option to both connect 564 and Craney Island in a way that doesn't involve any over the water intersections, which results in a potential option that would be cheaper than other options with over the water intersections. Alternative 7 includes an option that only has one over the water intersection, as opposed to other options that have 2, and that would be, my concern would be too expensive in the long run to build. So again, I think I'd like to just get the consensus of this body that this study really needs to figure out a way to make sure that we have a third crossing that connects both 564 and Craney Island. We do have the potential for $3.1 million to help us study a way to get the road across Craney Island in a way that will make Portsmouth happy, the Navy happy, the Corps happy. And so, again, this project will not be built in 5 years, probably won't be built in 10 years. So for us to take a little bit longer to get the 3.1 million and make sure we study this completely seems like a no-brainer to me. And so that would be my motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bobby Dyer, Virginia Beach, second.
Okay, we have a substitute motion and a second. Could I get someone from the working committee to respond, since the original motion did not have that and why it was not included? Is there anyone prepared to respond to that?
So, Mr. Still chairman of the working group. Options 5 and 7, due to the feasibility questions about the elevations required for connecting to both the 564 and landing at either 664 or 164, combined with the questions of operational access for the Corps and the questions and determinations for the rail component. The majority of the traffic we're expecting for the port is also going to be covered by rail. And how do you get to those elevations with a paralleling facility? Didn't believe that the small volume of truck traffic related to the high volume of pedestrian car traffic that we will see from those connections warranted continued exploration. At some point in the not too distant future, as the port continues to do their development activity, there will be a long series of studies, extensive activities to determine the best means of access egress as they reach towards the west, the south, and the north. But for the contract constraints we've got for the current study, it seemed better to move forward with the other alternatives in lieu of those.
Okay, and as far as where we are on schedule, is also my understanding we're currently, 2 years behind schedule where we projected we would be. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay, with that background, are we ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor of the
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm not ready to vote,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. I guess what I'm still not hearing is, does waiting delay the project further? I mean, I know there's a great deal of opinion that there's no feasibility there. One side says it's more costly, the other side says no. So I'd like a little more explanation as to how doing the $3.1 million study, how that delays moving forward with the other alternatives. How does it make it any slower or faster?
Mr. Crum, or is there in response to that from your technical staff or yourself?
Yes, I believe that's best answered. As a reminder, we do have an independent project manager, Dr. Robbenbach, working with our consultant team, Mr. Craig Eddy. Dr. Robbenbach, Mr. Eddy, I'd ask if you could please address those questions.
Craig, do you want to respond?
Yeah, the first part is that there won't be a significant delay to our study if we add 5 and 7 back in. We already have examined those segments to some degree, and we can complete that. The complexity comes in when our scope has that we only study 10 preliminary alternatives. So there'll be a budget issue if you add 2 more, and both with the 2 design options. So the recommendation from the working group was 4 alternatives and 2 design options for a total of 8 alternatives. If you're adding in 2 more alternatives and 2 more design options with each, we're up to 12. So that will budget situation, and I don't think Kevin Page is on the phone, but I'm not sure there's any more budget available, and we're already having to trim back on some other scope tasks in order to meet the overruns we've had and some of the other requests of the consultant team. So it's more of a budgetary thing than a schedule thing.
I see.
This is Bobby Dyer. I think, we've always confronted budgetary restraints, but I think it's important in this case that we take the time and effort to get it right.
Mr. Chair, this is Carl Jackson, City of Portsmouth. Just to say that Portsmouth staff has reviewed the alternatives, and we do have a significant problem with alternative 5, which is being proposed to be studied again. Any kind of 164 connector would impact the city's landfill, which currently has a 100-year capacity. But any kind of connector road at its full length would impact our landfill, as well as cause problems, for the Navy and for the Corps. And we've heard from those stakeholders several times on this. So I would recommend that we go with the original recommendation that was brought by the working group, which has been vetted, by staff from the cities, and which provides recommendations that do provide a spur into Craney Island, at least some of the alternatives do, versus the full connector, which would impact the Portsmouth landfill, as well as our partners in the military.
If I may respond, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So to Mr. Jackson, you're saying that any 164 connector will affect your landfill, and I'd like to respond by saying it might affect your landfill. And further study with the $3.1 million that we've applied for may find a way to build this where it won't affect your landfill. We are not in a hurry. We've heard that. No one here today has said that we're in a hurry. So let's take our time. Let's continue to study it. There's no reason not to at this point. This is a project that will be extremely important to our children and our grandchildren. It's not something that will be built in 5 or 10 years. So let's take the time and study it and do it right. There's no harm in that. And if the budget is an issue and we need to get rid of options, I would suggest alternative 8 is not in compliance with the long range plan. And so we can remove that one if you need to remove some options. But let's take our time. If it takes a little more budget, we can talk about that. But in the end, again, this is a project that my children and my grandchildren will benefit from. I probably won't. And all of us on this call probably won't. We're making a long range plan decision here. There's no harm in taking the time and doing it right.
Mr. Chair. Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
sorry.
this is Mayor Glover.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
In listening to the explanations and the reasoning, and I guess why my position is, and I know our staff has looked at this, if there's an opportunity for us to get it right, as my gentleman said previous to me, I think it was Vice Mayor Martin Thomas, we need to do what's in the best interest of the future. And I think by taking our time, we come out with the best potential options, perhaps. And so, I understand some of the implications, but long range, it's important for us to do the best and come up with the best outcome. So that's what I think. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have another question.
Yes, sir.
If we take the action to eliminate those 2 alternatives, could the study continue, the 3.1 million study continue, and then if the options look viable, then reconsider our position? Is that a possibility?
I was going to ask the same thing. Dr. Ravenbach, could you respond to that?
I think, Mayor, this is possible. Let me just also remind everyone here, once you make the decision today on these preliminary alternatives, the next step would be for the consultant team to work with the working group to come up with 3 candidate alternatives. So let's say we go today, you make the decision. So this is not going to be the final alternative of the study. We still have the next step to do a lot of technical analysis to come up with 3 candidate alternatives. And in order to do that, you have to, based on the scope of work that you all approve, we have to look at the permittability of each of the 3 candidate alternatives and the constructability. So we will look at those issues that we just discussed today. They're going to come up again. The Navy is going to express their concerns because of the next step of their fuel depot. And you've heard City of Portsmouth concern and the Army Corps of Engineers concern. So those issues going to come back to us again during the next step of the process. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew today is not really final. We still have to look at these alternatives, look at the way, work with this agency and to see if we can get a permit for the final alternative. So these issues, they're not going to go away. They're going to stay with us and they're going to come back. I just want to put that on the table so everyone knows where we're going from here.
Mr. Chairman, this is Kathy Big from the port. May I ask a question, please?
Sure.
So Camelia, are you all going to do a deeper engineering study and look at alternative designs or only look at permittability of what's currently on paper?
I think we're going to look at permittability and constructability. And Craig Eddy can help me here with the detailed scope of work and how we're going to do that. But that's, Kathy, part of the scope. And what we decide today is not going to be final. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of, are we going to be able to get a permit for the final alternative? Are we going to be able to construct the alternative? So those are major issues still in the works for us.
Mr. Chairman, that seems like even more reason to continue to consider all alternatives in the opinion of the port. Thanks for the opportunity to ask the question.
Is there any further on readiness?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to comment from the Navy, Michael King here. I just want to state for the record that, the Navy doesn't oppose any improvements to our regional transportation network when they don't affect our mission. We obviously benefit greatly from any improvements that are being done around the region, in particular the recent widening of the HRBT. We're not opposed to a third crossing either. The only thing we are concerned about is any impact to our fuel depot or our fuel depot phase 2 expansion on our property. And we have to draw a line in the sand for national security interests that we can't have an interstate system impact. And I hear Norfolk, this is long range, this is, 30 years down the road potentially, and things change all the time. But as of right now, if there's a way around it, we're not opposed to it. We just want to reiterate the fact that we just could not sign on to something that impacts our regional Mid-Atlantic fuel depot. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments on readiness?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Donnie Tuck, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
And this may be a question for Mr. Crum. Back in the fall of 2016, when the efforts were made initially to promote the expansion of Hampton Bridge Tunnel as the alternative in this area, one of the concerns or considerations was that for Mayor Alexander to support it was that we agreed to study the third crossing, and there was some money set aside. So my question is this $3.1 million money that HR TAC is setting aside for the study, or is this money that's coming from someplace else?
No, that if I may, Mr. Chairman, address Mayor
Yes, sir.
Tuck's question. Thank you. Important to go back to bring us forward to present and then talk about the 3.1. Mayor Tuck is absolutely correct. In October 2016, when we made the decision to select as part of the Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement analysis, the SEIS, for the project that best met our needs to move forward with, we selected the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, plus a suite of other projects like the I-64 Peninsula, the 264-64 interchange, the high-rise bridge, and the 64 South Side, along with analysis of improvements to the Bowers Hill interchange, was the suite of projects that we used at that time as the first step to unlock our region. Mayor Tuck is absolutely correct. As part of the TPO's very bold vote that day to select those projects for moving forward, it was also agreed that the regional connector study funded by HR TAC would evaluate all the other alternatives that were not selected that day. And those include things like the Monitor Merrimack Bridge Tunnel, the 564 extension of Monitor Merrimack, the third crossing, if you will, the Craney Island connector, the 164 connector. To quote Dr. Robbenbach, the purpose was to say, at that time we had a number of comments being expressed, as there are today, on whether or not some of those segments could be permitted and could be constructed. So Mayor Tuck, you're right on point by saying that the $7 million allocated by HR TAC was to look at those projects, determine which would best help us move across our harbor, peninsula to south side, and determine whether those segments, which of those segments that gave us the most benefit could be permitted and could be constructed. Fast forward to today, Mayor Tuck, the $3.1 million that Mr. Thomas has raised and the port has raised. And Mr. Thomas, I'll let you come in behind me on this, but that is an earmark, an appropriation request that has been made of our congressional leaders, led by the port, to say, could they get $3 million? I think this study's pointing out a lot of challenges, as Mr. Jackson and others have pointed out in the military, of constructing a road near Craney Island and near that fueling depot. And I think that's why, as Ms. Vick and Mr. Thomas has said, they requested this additional appropriations money to further evaluate that possible connection. So Mr. Thomas, Ms. Vick, I might ask if you could clarify that. But Mayor Tuck, that's additional money, non-HR TAC money.
Yes, Mr. Crum, thank you. If I could, this initially was a planning study, not a full engineering study. And it's why I asked the last question, because typically permittability and constructability is done during engineering studies, and alternative engineering designs are explored to alleviate if there are conflicts or if there are challenges to permitting. And that is not what is being done here. They are looking at lines on paper and saying this particular thing without any deviation could or cannot be permitted, or could or cannot be constructed without a full engineering study. So that is why we asked, because we knew that this was just a planning study and that there was not funding. And so the Business Roundtable, the TPO, the Hampton Roads Alliance, Reinvent, there's a whole group of Hampton Roads Infrastructure Coalition, Harumfa, we're all on it, all supported this submission for this additional $3.1 million to do a full engineering study to look at alternative designs that might allow for that. Because as Mr. Thomas stated, there is going to be a terminal there. It is going to move 5 million TEUs annually. That is the size of the port of New York and New Jersey. just to give you an order of magnitude. That cargo is going to have to go somewhere. So we can ignore that fact and we can throw out now alternatives that can support that and support the movement of that from Norfolk into Suffolk and Chesapeake and, you know, across to the peninsula on 2 routes. Or you cannot, but that's the policy decision you're making. And I would implore you to have them continue to explore those alternatives as we requested at the beginning and not to throw them out now prematurely. Thank you, Mr. Crum.
Okay. Any further comments or unreadiness? I don't believe the question was answered as to if there was additional money available or where we would, if this action was to go forward. Was that question answered?
So what I responded to Mayor Tuck was the additional 3.1 million is a request the port has made to our federal representatives for a federal appropriation. It would not be HR TAC monies.
No, I'm talking about the additional money that Mr. Eddie said would cost if we added back to these 2 alternatives.
Thank you, sir. No, we do not have, as Mr. Eddie indicated, we do not have monies to expand the scope in hand.
So I guess then the question is, and I you know, this is just up for discussion. Can we vote on something that we can't fund or we don't have an alternative fund for yet? It is, I just throw that out.
Question is, we can vote on it. Should we approve something that we can't fund?
Right.
Can it be approved contingent upon getting the funding from this earmark?
Then I would ask if that would be considered to add that to your amended motion as a favorable condition.
I would suggest if the issue with funding is the number of alternatives, then let's just reduce the number of alternatives. Number 8 was added. Number 8 can be removed, and that will reduce the scope and reduce the costs that we're so concerned about. But again, the amount of the cost that we're talking about right now will be a rounding error to our children and our grandchildren. So
I understand that, but I'm just trying to be fiscally responsible. What you're asking is not part of the amended motion because the amended motion, the original motion was as stated that included these 2. If we go to eliminate now, then we've changed the original motion. I'm not a parliamentarian, but that seems like that would be what we would be doing.
Right, but I guess my response is to make the motion to include alternative 5 and 7 contingent upon getting the federal money doesn't make sense if 5 and 7 are still good options. We should keep good options on the table whether the federal money is coming or not. That's making a foolish decision. If you want to please don't interrupt me. If you want to postpone this until we see if we get the money, that would be reasonable. But to suggest that we should throw out good options because we don't have a little bit of money now is the wrong way for this board to handle this decision.
I wasn't talking about the federal money. I was talking about the person that said that adding these 2 would be additional to the 7 million that was originally given to this project, not the federal money that you're seeking for the alternative. So I'm asking you to have a amended motion accepting that if the funding can come from HR TAC to support that you make that part of your motion. Otherwise, you're asking us to vote on something that we don't have the money to do.
I would say that we need to go back to HR TAC and get the funds, but I'm not going to make the vote of those 2 options contingent upon getting that money. We can throw out other options if you want, but those 2 are good options that we should keep on the table. So it does not make sense to remove 2 good options.
Well, since you're unwilling to accept that, then we'll go forward with asking for the vote as is if there's no unreadiness.
And if anyone has any other questions about that, that's fine. But does anyone disagree with me, agree with me here? But Mr. Chair, I mean, you're asking me to make two good options contingent upon funding when they're no better or worse than other options, as far as I see it, as far as the port sees it.
I mean, that's an opinion you have. There, people may disagree with that.
I'd call for the vote.
I would like to say respond to this part. One part of your argument for including those two options was that we are getting $3.1 million from earmark to study it. Now you're saying you're not willing to make that motion contingent upon that. I'm sorry, I can't support your motion.
Rick, I think we're getting things confused because the chair is asking me to make it contingent upon HR TAC giving them more money, or maybe I'm confused. What is the request then? Someone clarify.
My understanding from the consultant and from the work group was that if we put 5 and 7 in, it would take that would bring us to 10 or 12, I don't remember, which would take additional money to study. That funding isn't coming from the government. This fund is going to come from the additional 7 million from HR TAC. So we've got to go back to HR TAC to see if there's additional funding available to do your request. And all I was asking you to do is make that a friendly part of your amendment to see if those funds were available through HR TAC.
Okay, so Rick, that's different than what you were asking, Rick. I think.
It is, you're right.
Will, let me ask staff this question, if that's okay, because I don't know the answer. If the motion is to continue to include 5 and 7 and remove 8, what is the delta? What is the cost?
And I'm saying we cannot, according to my understanding of parliamentary procedure, remove something from the original motion, which included them. That's the third motion.
I'm just asking a question on what the cost is. I'm just asking a question. I'm not making a motion right now. I'm just asking a question.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Mayor Dooman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to get in here. I'm just sitting back listening to the discussion. At this particular point, it appears to me that there's a possibility of acquiring this $3.1 million to do the more extensive study. So the prudent thing to me just appears that we put this discussion off and this decision off until you find out whether that money is available. If it's not available, then you can have all these discussions as to whether you want to eliminate one, add one, keep 5 in, keep 7 in. But at this particular time, it seems prudent just to let things be as they are now until you find out about that $3 million and where that money is going to come from. And if the majority at that time determine that they do not want to spend that extra money, then of course, then that would be the time to actually eliminate, or at least have the discussion as to whether you want to eliminate 5 and 7 again. And that's just me looking at it from the outside. There seems to be a whole lot of discussion about, not a whole lot as far as I'm concerned right now, that in my opinion, the only prudent thing to do is to wait to see if the $3 million comes through. If it does, you do your study, and then that's going to answer most of your questions, and you can move forward with an intelligent decision. And that's how I look at it from the outside, not having that much experience with the rest of it.
Okay, is there any further unreadiness or question?
I think Mayor Dooman makes a good point.
Mr. Chair, I guess we did ask staff, what are the ramifications if we put off any action today, which seems to be what Mayor Dooman is suggesting.
Pavitra and Mr. Ed, or excuse me, Camelia and Mr. Eddy, do you want to address that, please?
Bob, I can try while we're getting Craig Eddy. I think we are at 50% completion of the study, Mayor Todd. So if I understood your question, did you ask that we put everything on hold until we know about the fund?
It seems to be what Mayor Dooman is suggesting, is that we put off every action that we're proposing today. So my question is, if we put it off until we find out about this $3.1 million, what are the ramifications? Is there some type of timetable we're trying to meet? Is there something that will happen that will be negative if we don't get this thing done today?
Perhaps we can move forward with the study while we put alternative 5 and 7 on hold, and we continue the work with the recommendations that came from the working group on those 4 alternatives and 2 design options. And we work with those 4 alternatives and design options while we're putting 5 and 7 on hold, which was part of the substitute motion. And then when the money is available, we can go back and study those 2.
Well, I think what I've heard from Mayor Price is to make, for Vice Mayor Thomas to make his motion contingent. And I think that's what we're saying now. You just said, we can proceed with what we're planning and we can put 5 and 7 in contingent. Vice Mayor Thomas is saying, regardless of whether or not we get the 3.1 million, he's saying that 5 and 7 should be in, which is a different motion. So the question is, do we put this off to another time, which would require perhaps a third motion, which would be another substitute motion to say, I move that we table this until the $3.1 million comes in, at which point we will add 5 and 7 to study.
But
was that a motion?
Not my motion.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
No, I'm not going to substitute my own motion. I would suggest that if somebody else who's not made a motion wants to offer that, that would be appropriate, I believe, which would say that we will put off any action today and consider 5 and 7 as alternatives based upon this $3.1 million coming through. Otherwise, it seems that the state position is that we just cross everything and add 5 and 7.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question of Camelia? Camelia, if you did that, what is the impact of not moving all of the alternatives for evaluation at the same time? Isn't the whole point of the study to look at the alternatives together and to compare them?
It is. That's, you have to look at, but you look at each alternative based on their technical merit and based on issues related to each alternative. And then once you have all the technical analysis, you make that comparison in order to get to the final 3 candidate alternatives. I think that's the process, but we could start the work and start analyzing those 4 alternatives that was recommended by the working group. And I don't know how long it's going to take to get assurances about that extra funding for the analysis of 5 and 7. But I think we would continue the work until that time, so we can have the other 2, if we have the funding, and start making comparison among the alternatives.
Do we know an estimate of, because again, this is for a planning study. The 3.1 is for a full engineering study. And I think we have to do apples to apples, right, of all of these alternatives. So what is the estimated cost delta of keeping in these 2 with the others? And I just want to point out that these are original. There are alternatives that you're keeping in that were newly created, that were not part of the original that this funding was intended for. So I just want everyone to be aware of that as they're thinking about, let's throw these 2 out, but include others that weren't contemplated to begin with. And also would like to know the delta of cost, because there may be an opportunity, as the chairman suggested, that HR TAC can fund the delta if it's not very much. We've heard nothing about what the difference is between the cost of evaluating 12 versus 10 during phase 3. And I think that's important for everybody to understand before we make this delay on 2 that have been contemplated from the beginning and should be included.
I have to defer to Mr. Eddy for the delta, for the cost. Is Craig?
Is Mr. Eddy still with us? I don't believe he is.
I see his name on the screen. Craig?
Well,
I think he's having audio
Can
issues.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I tried to connect my phone because I was told my thing wasn't clear. With regard to Kathy's question, I can't give you an estimate off the top of my head of what 2 extra alternatives would cost. So I apologize. I can get that for you fairly quickly, but I don't want to hold myself to anything number I throw out there now.
So how
So-
are you sure that it would cost more? And is there
Well,
not a reevaluation?
just sheer
of
numbers,
detail?
Kathy. 12 takes more time than 10.
Well, you all decided to add them, right? But it seems to me before you decided to add others, you would have known that you would run out of money if you kept adding them. But can you not also reevaluate this?
That's
Would
an
you not-
inaccurate statement. We always knew that 10 was the limit. That was what we were scoped for. The fact that we added some additional alternatives with different combinations of the segments and different derivatives outside of those was all a working group. We all knew that 10 was the limit.
Okay,
once you,
it seems to me that you should have come back to the steering committee before you added any over 10 and put them in this situation. But let me ask one more question. Is there not a reevaluation of scope of the analysis that could be done on each one so that you could do 12 within your current budget?
this is Mike Duman again, if I could interject something. Once again, just listening to the conversation, it seems like, we're kind of jumping off of bridge 2 and 3, and we don't know if we're going to go over bridge 1 or not. To Mr. Thomas's point, I don't think the motion he would want the motion to be, or if we're going to consider those, whether you want to throw them out if the funding's not available. So my question would be, how long will it take approximately till we find out whether this $3.1 million is going to be available for the comprehensive study? And if that is not a prolonged period of time, like I said before, I think that's another discussion when you talk about the alternatives. If the 3.1 million is not forthcoming and does not materialize, then a lot of the discussion you seem to be having is predicated on that. And that is, what happens if the 3.1 million is not available? Do you want to delete 8? Do you want to try to get additional funding? Do you want to take 5 and 7 and just delete them at that time? So just looking at it from the outside, trying to make a decision, I think a lot of it, we're talking about where the $3 million comes from, and you don't know if you've lost it yet. So to me, that's a discussion that needs to be made in the future, and everybody just seems to be beating their brains out to figure out what we're going to do if this money doesn't materialize. And I think that's a discussion for a later date. And then everybody can plead their case to try to get money from HTAC or delete some other option or whatever it is that it wants to do. And then you determine whether you want to consider 5 or 7 at that point. But as long as the funding is an issue, I don't think you can make that decision right now. I mean, at least that's how I look at it.
Mayor, all due respect, you're no longer outside, you're elected. But the other part of that is the conversation has moved beyond the contingency. I think now the concern is that 5 and 7 were original parts of these alternatives, and they would still like to see them included, regardless of whether or not there's 3.1. So I would like to remove I'd like to take back my original motion and like to offer a new motion in substitute of Mr. Thomas, which would be that we defer a decision today, that we explore what monies are available either through HR TAC or through this $3.1 million to reevaluate 5 and 7.
I
So
will
basically,
se-
it's a deferral of action today.
Mayor Tuck, I will second that, and I'll tell you why. I did a little back of the hand calculation, and it seems to me that if we're 50% of the way through of $7.1 million with 3.5-ish remaining, and you split that into 12 or 10 different segments, whichever one we go with, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000. That's the number we're arguing over today. So it seems to me it should be very easy for us to get either $60,000 from within the contract that we're already studying or from HR TAC. But thank you, Mayor Tuck. I will second that motion.
I'd like to make a comment on that estimate. This study is not a straight line spend. It gets much heavier at the end due to the public involvement and the scope associated with that. So the straight line comparison is not accurate.
Yeah, but you wouldn't give us a number, so I had to come up with one.
Okay, Donnie, was your motion, the first motion was to accept the original as came out of the committee, right?
Right, but I want to take back that motion and offer a substitute. which would be a
Again,
substitute
not
to-
being a parliamentarian, and I'm sure I don't know that we can do that since we have to first vote on the amended motion to the original. That's what I think. So
Understand.
I'm going to do that until someone who is a parliamentarian can correct me. Vote on the amended motion to the original. If there's no further discussion.
So if you want me to amend my motion to what Mr. Mayor Tuck just stated, I can do that. Does that clear up things for you?
I think you can do that one.
Okay. So I will amend my motion to exactly what Mayor Tuck is getting ready to restate right now. Mayor Tuck, please.
We defer any action today. And that our action be contingent on funding being available for options 5 and 7. 5 and 7 still be included as a part of the study. And if the $3.1 million comes through, fine. If not,
Wait a minute. That's two different kinds of money. You're talking about a $3.1 million study that could take years versus the money to add these two to what the committee has recommended. Those are two different parts of money.
well, part of it is this, and I understand that. But they're saying
Right
they
now,
want
what you're doing
to
is
wait.
freezing the committee work.
Right, because I think that's what's before us.
But
agree
I
with it, but
want
at
you
the
to
time,
understand what your motion is suggesting, that we not move forward with anything until we have some governmental study, which we don't know how long it's going to take.
Well, it's not the governmental study, it's a $3.1 million. That's what they're saying is a $3.1 million. We should wait until the $3.1 million comes.
Or
That's
until we can get the money from
Thomas's
HR
motion is. His motion is that we've got a $3.1 million request out there, and we shouldn't do anything until that 3.1 comes.
With
Well, it's
no
not the
idea.
government's going to do the study.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that it is two different pots of money and that there is a more immediate need to complete this study with all alternatives moving forward at the same time. And so I think, and I don't have the ability to make a motion because I'm a non-voting member, but just in an effort, maybe Mr. Thomas or Mr. Tuck would like to amend their motion to table this until we receive an estimate from Mr. Eddy on what it would take to complete the phase 3 evaluation of all 12 alternatives. And we can learn from HR TAC whether or not there might be that amount of money to continue all 12 alternatives simultaneously to the end of phase 3, so we can make an educated decision on the best alternatives to move forward. That's it.
And that amendment I would accept.
I'm happy to substitute what she
What I
just
hope
said.
to have said, yes. All
Is there a
right.
second to that motion?
And I would second that, Bobby Dyer.
Moved in second without any further discussion. Can we have a roll call vote on that motion, please? That substitute motion, please.
Keith, could you please put the roll call on the screen? Okay. Mayor West,
Nay.
Mayor Todd,
Aye.
Mayor Price,
Nay.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Glover,
Aye.
Mayor Duman,
Aye.
Mayor Dyer.
Aye.
Five yeas and 2 noes, so the motion passed.
Okay, so the substitute motion has passed that, and as I understand the motion, that we would go back to HR TAC and see what it would cost to include 5 and 7 into the original motion, and then to see if we can find funding to do that so that the committee could then go forward with all of those options. Is that understanding correct?
Mr. Chairman, if I did hear one other clarifying item. Before that would happen, that we would have Mr. Eddy, our consultant from Michael Baker, fully take a look at when he has time. And I think to quote Ms. Vick, what it would cost to carry all 12 alternatives forward with that analysis. So the first important part of this step, I believe, would be for Craig Eddy and Michael Baker to tell us what that cost would be, and probably bring that cost back to you first, if that makes sense. So you can get an idea of that scope. I
will.
Okay, very good.
All right, any further business for today? Thank you for the 30-minute meeting, and we will stand adjourned.